Yage, Kapi, Ayahuasca. All names for the ancient psychedelic brew used by over 100 different South American cultures, dating back to 5,000 years. The brew was used by shamans for religious and medicinal purposes. Now, despite over 70 recorded indigenous names, it's most commonly referred to as ayahuasca and still used both culturally and has become popularized by Hollywood elites after going on retreats and coming back with new life experiences. In order to understand ayahuasca, shamanism is equally as important to know. There is so much historical information on shamanism, and defining it is challenging. Shamans are a part of shamanism when it comes to ayahuasca. Shamans were said to be able to alter their consciousness at will, visit other realities or the world of spirits, communicate with their spirits, and impart their newly acquired wisdom. 3 ancient cultures have significant interaction with ayahuasca: the many indigenous people of Peru, the Incas, and the Mestizos. Peru has the most history involving ayahuasca. Modern history has analyzed that Peru, the place with the most history, coined the name ayahuasca from the Quechua language. Aya, meaning corpse or soul, and huasca as vine, quite literally calling the drink a rope of souls. The drink is so deep-rooted in Amazonian culture, it could have helped give an idea of worldview. Ayahuasca has historically been employed for creative inspiration, military purposes, divination, and as a central motif in cultural traditions. Its applications in healing encompass the genesis of illness, retrieving harmful artifacts, engaging in shamanic battles with the animating agents of illness, and shamanic trips to recover soul loss. The first ever ayahuasca trip is believed to have taken place in Peru. 22 mummies found in southern Peru underwent hair analysis, and plants commonly found in ayahuasca were detected. Interestingly, the plants are not native to this region and are thought to have been transported across the Andes Mountains. This shows that the use of ayahuasca as far back as 5,000 years. One native Peruvian, Juan Salcamaya, wrote a manuscript discussing Peruvian culture. He is credited with being one of the chosen recipients of the traditions of his people. Stories he wrote came to him from the lips of those who witnessed them. He spoke mostly about the different planes of humanity and life. These ideas were developed using ideas from shamanism, which were under the influence of ayahuasca when receiving these otherworldly messages from entities. He writes how the world was called Pacha. It was a square world. The lowest plane was Earth, which gave support to the 4 quarters where dwelt the gods. The idea was largely popular in both shamanism in Peru as well as other indigenous groups. Because of how important ayahuasca was in many of these cultures, it could be theorized that it had an effect on this theory that was shared in this ancient text, like many others like it. The Inca used ayahuasca in a different way than the peaceful and spiritual way used in shamanism. Children were the subjects of a sacrifice and were found to be intoxicated by ayahuasca. It is thought that they may have given this to the children in order to treat their anxiety or as an offering to the gods. The way it was consumed and prepared in this case was not in a way to experience hallucinations or the DMT effects of ayahuasca, but to receive the more mild and calming effects. Inca mythology and religion focused on the worship of the sun. Unfortunately, ancient texts outlining this are hard to find because of the language used. Quipu is believed to be the only quote-unquote written language of the Inca Empire, and is a system of different cords and knots tied in ropes attached to a longer cord knot. The ropes also have different colors, which may have encoded information. Much of the Inca history was passed through the mouth. Deciphering this code of Quipu is extremely difficult, but was used to govern an empire for centuries. Because of this, the ancient texts regarding Inca lifestyle and mythology are not from their height in the 14 to 1500s. One text is from 1910 and explains the importance of sacrifice, explaining why ayahuasca use is necessary. In the text, The Shepherd and the Daughter of the Sun, a sheep is sacrificed in order to please the sun god. Because of this, sacrifices became important to the Incas and led to children being sacrificed eventually. It is said that children were sacrificed and buried on a mountain originally called Campato, a word meaning toad in the Inca language. Inca associated toads with water or rain. One scientist states that the mountain was likely linked to water or rain, and the children perhaps sacrificed were to ask the mountain gods to send water. Mestizos also used ayahuasca and had a unique relationship with it. After colonists from Europe began to come into Peru and other parts of the Amazon, they began to use ayahuasca themselves. They were known as mestizos and were the mixed people of Europe and indigenous cultures. Although they were encouraged to adopt Western culture and not partake in indigenous practices, ayahuasca was used by them. Mestizo shamanism has a hub in the province of Loreto in northern Peru. It's said that 10% of mestizos here use ayahuasca. As these traditions grew, they began to use indigenous practices more. Before colonialism, masks served as elements of transformation that allowed rulers and priests to assume the identity of their gods during ritual ceremonies. This helped bridge communication between the spiritual and natural world. This basis of their idea of spirituality was found by using ayahuasca and the hallucinations that came with it. In mestizo culture, these rituals still took place, but with figures from the Bible rather than the deities from the original indigenous culture, bringing a middle ground on the two cultures. While it was important for mestizos to use and take ayahuasca, one ancient text also reveals the importance of converting indigenous cultures to Christianity. The friar Bernardino de Sahagún dedicated his life to converting indigenous populations to Christianity. Closely tied with his missionary work were his efforts to recover ancient knowledge and provide an illustrated historical account of the Nahuas. Sahagún interviewed prominently native elders. He compiled a chronicle of the events told from the indigenous point of view in their native language. Political struggles of the time later motivated Sahagún to revise the account, adding passages praising the Spanish, especially Hernán Cortés. It is the most famous surviving manuscript version of the published Historia General. The book was written from the perspective of this Christian missionary and left out key parts of indigenous culture, including the use of ayahuasca and the way it can help. This text was a key piece when finding out why ayahuasca never took off in Europe like other drugs. The positive attributes of indigenous life were purposefully left out as it was seen as propaganda for indigenous life and threatened the Christian power in the country of Spain. Through these three cultures, we could successfully see the use of ayahuasca and its importance in ancient indigenous cultures of South America and how it was a positive influence when discovering spirituality in these cultures and regions.